Welcome, dear saints and strangers, to Deseret Radio, broadcasting from the sunburnt edge of the Promised Land, from the silence between hymns, from the desert that remembers everything. The temperature today is a crisp 87 degrees, with a 40% chance of manna if you've paid your tithing. The Fourth Ward has returned. But first, let's talk about Hoss. The bees of Deseret still refuse to speak of Hoss. Not directly, not in words. But when his name comes up, they pause. Just for a second. Just long enough to notice. Just long enough to make you wonder. What we know is this: Hoss does not come when called. Hoss comes when needed. And lately, there have been signs. A barn door in Nephi, unlatched in the night. Inside, a thief lay unconscious, untouched, unharmed, save for the single playing card left on his chest. A joker. No footprints led to or from the barn. A prospector in Moab claimed he saw a man at dusk, tall, broad, wearing a hat pulled low. He was leading a black horse, but the horse had no rider. He did not speak. He only tipped his hat. The prospector blinked, and the man was gone. But when he looked down, his pickaxe had been sharpened, his boots had been shined, and his pockets, once empty, now contained a single golden honeycomb. And last night, a child was found outside her home in Lehi, wrapped in an old pioneer coat, perfectly unharmed. She had been missing for 3 days. She says she followed a man through the hills, that he led her home, that he never spoke, but he hummed a tune, low and steady, like the wind before a storm. Her parents asked her if she knew his name. She only shrugged. "I didn't have to ask," she said. "Saints, Hoss is near." In other news, the primary children's choir rehearsal was interrupted yesterday when a flock of seagulls, yes, seagulls in the middle of the desert, crashed through the chapel windows carrying what looked like tiny scrolls in their beaks. The scrolls were blank, except for one that simply read, "Ask your parents about the white salamander." Naturally, this has sparked debate in the ward council. Sister Rodriguez insists it's a prank by the deacons, while Brother Pratt swears it's a coded message from the 3 Nephites. Either way, the seagulls are now roosting in the cultural hall, and the Relief Society is organizing a cleanup crew. Members of the Fourth Ward have returned. They appeared silently in their homes, on porches, in kitchens, in the middle of living rooms still adorned with last month's primary crafts. They are unharmed, or so it seems. Their clothes are pressed, their shoes polished, but their eyes are distant. Brother Jensen, who had been missing since the Fourth Ward vanished, was found standing in his garage, staring at a lawnmower that hasn't worked since 2007. When his wife asked him where he had been, he exhaled slowly and said, "I was just at church." Sister Whitaker, who disappeared along with the rest of them, returned to her home at precisely 2 p.m., sat down at her kitchen table, and methodically ate an entire box of store-brand graham crackers. She maintains that she is fine, that everything is fine, that her absence was nothing unusual. The Fourth Ward meeting house, however, remains missing. No sign of it, no foundation, no debris, but members claim they were just there, that Sunday services went on as normal, that they heard the opening prayer, passed the sacrament, sat through the talks, that Brother Haber's lesson on the word of wisdom was fine, if a little dry. But when asked what hymns were sung, their expressions turn blank. When asked who spoke in sacrament meeting, they hesitate. When asked where they were last week, they fall silent. Somehow, they returned. But saints, the question remains, from where? The Deseret Intelligence Agency has released an official statement. Situation contained. No further action required. Do not attempt to locate the Fourth Ward building. Do not attempt to reconstruct the Fourth Ward building. Do not attempt to think too hard about the Fourth Ward building. The members of the Fourth Ward are in good standing. They are normal. They are exactly as they have always been. Any discrepancies are a result of personal misremembering, temporal distortions, or minor clerical errors. If a member of the Fourth Ward insists that they were somewhere else, they are joking. If they are not joking, they are mistaken. If they are not mistaken, they were never members of the Fourth Ward to begin with. Please report any further anomalies to your local stake presidency, provided they still exist in this timeline. This concludes our statement. Saints, if you encounter a member of the Fourth Ward, proceed with caution. Be polite. Offer them a casserole, but do not ask too many questions. And whatever you do, do not follow them if they say they're going back to church. Saints, it has happened again. A multi-level marketing group, disguised as a fitness supplement, disguised as a beauty cream, disguised as a sacred financial opportunity for righteous saints, has attempted once again to infiltrate Deseret. They arrived in Cybertrucks with out-of-state plates, parking neatly in a circle, as if in some kind of ritual. They wore matching pastel blazers. They smiled too much. One of them, a woman named Heather, or possibly Rachel, or possibly both at the same time, stood at the pulpit in a Relief Society room that no one remembers unlocking and whispered, "Sisters, have you ever wanted to be your own boss?" The air shifted. The lights dimmed. The phrase generational wealth echoed, even though she hadn't said it out loud yet. Sister Thompson stood immediately. She raised a single authoritative finger, the same finger she once used to silence rowdy primary classes and backseat driving husbands. "Not this time," she said, and just like that, the women in pastel vanished. Their flyers turned to dust. Their free samples melted into pools of essential oil and regret. But saints, we must remain vigilant. The MLMs always return. They take new forms. They sell new promises. They change names, rebrand, rise again, eternal and undying, like some kind of financial hydra with a downline. If a woman you have not seen before approaches you at a park or a grocery store and says, "Hey girl, did we go to high school together?" do not answer. Do not engage. Do not, under any circumstances, accept the free sample, because it is not free. Nothing ever is. Last Wednesday's mutual activity was supposed to be a scavenger hunt. Something fun, something simple, something to keep the beehives and deacons from staring at their phones and asking if they could just hang out instead. The list was standard youth activity fare: a feather from a mourning dove, a stone that has never been touched by sunlight, a name that has never been spoken aloud. The youth split into teams, racing across the chapel parking lot, laughing, shoving, digging through the dusty grass near the irrigation ditch. Sister Reynolds, the young women's president, had brought Oreos and Capri Suns. The bishop gave a short lesson about working together as a team before heading to his office. And at 8:43 p.m., something changed. No one saw what happened exactly, but the doors to the young women's room will not open, not locked, not jammed, just sealed, as though the room has never been there at all. Sister Reynolds has tried everything. The keys don't fit the lock anymore. The hinges won't budge. Brother Lindstrom, the Fourth Ward librarian, whose ward may or may not exist anymore, pressed his ear against the door and whispered, "It's not empty." He would not elaborate. The bishopric is handling it. This morning they gathered in the hallway outside the door, speaking in hushed voices. Brother Jensen, still looking oddly distant since his return, kept glancing at the ceiling, rubbing his temples. At one point, the Relief Society president walked past, carrying a plate of funeral potatoes. She paused, frowned, and asked why the young women's door was humming. No one had an answer. Later that afternoon, A deacon came forward and admitted that his team had found the last item on the list, that they had followed the instructions, that they had spoken a name that had never been spoken aloud. He will not repeat the name. And saints? That might be for the best. The DIA has not yet issued a statement, which is strange, because they were seen standing outside the church building last night. 3 men in dark suits, their blank name tags reflecting the glow of the streetlights. They did not enter. They did not knock. They simply watched. For now, the young women are meeting in the overflow section of the gym. Attendance has been low. If you hear a soft knock from inside the sealed room, try to answer, but don't tell the DIA that you did. This morning, every Deseret radio staff member found an unmarked cassette tape on their doorstep. No label, no note, just a single black tape, old but pristine. Brother Lindstrom, the ward librarian and reluctant participant in all of this, volunteered to play one. He placed it in an approved Deseret radio tape deck, pressed play, and sat back. Static. A pause. Then, a voice. It was wrong. Ward radio has responded. This morning, a Deseret radio intern, Brother Chase, who we have told repeatedly to stop investigating things, discovered a second cassette left in the foyer of a stake center. On it, written in black marker, were 3 words: Deseret, prepare yourself. We have long hoped that it could remain a disagreement, a difference of interpretation, a doctrinal misunderstanding buried under layers of church bureaucracy. But saints, it is looking more and more like a war.
Ward radio won't be trifled with.
The watchers have moved. For months, years perhaps, they have stood, silent and unblinking, on corners, in parking lots, in the back rows of sacrament meeting, where no one remembers them arriving, but everyone remembers them leaving. But last night they moved again. A witness, a reliable one, a high priest group leader, which means this is serious, claims to have seen 3 watchers walking, not in a rush, not aimlessly, with purpose. They moved together toward the mountains, not the temple, not the city, but the places in between, the places where the old things remain, the places where Hoss has been seen. And when they were gone, the wind picked up. And then, before dawn, a message arrived. Not from the DIA, not from any known source, just a single handwritten note left on the pulpit of the tabernacle. The paper was yellowed, creased, folded too many times to count. The ink had already dried decades ago. It read, "They are not watching anymore. They are seeking. Do not be found." Brother Lindstrom, after reading it, folded it carefully, slid it into his pocket and said, "We should have seen this coming. But saints, what exactly is coming?" Saints, the moon is high over the valley, casting its cold, steady light on a people who do not sleep. Not when the 4th Ward has returned. Not when Ward radio has declared itself an enemy. Not when the watchers are no longer watching. Somewhere beyond the city limits, a horse exhales, slow and deliberate. Somewhere in the tabernacle, a note is being read for the 2nd time. Somewhere in a darkened office, a cassette tape spins, though no one pressed play. And somewhere, on a road that does not appear on any map, a car has stalled. It is an electric car, and that is a problem. Because as of this evening, the City Council has officially banned electric vehicles within Deseret. Those caught attempting to charge an electric vehicle will be fined. Those caught driving one will be escorted from the valley. Those caught trying to figure out why will receive a single warning, delivered by a man in a perfectly pressed suit and a name tag that bears no name. The official explanation? It is the will of the saints. The unofficial explanation? Well, saints. Those who were there at precisely 5:50 a.m. last night, when the watchers moved, when the wind changed, when the radio signal flickered, know exactly why. They will not say. They will not speak of the shape they saw in the road ahead. They will not describe what was standing in the charging station, unplugging the cables, one by one, slow and deliberate. They will not tell you what they saw in the reflection of their rearview mirrors before they turned around and never looked back, because it is not their story to tell. And so we close another broadcast, dear saints. We go to our homes. We lock our doors. We set our radios to a frequency that does not exist, listening for something we do not expect to hear. Sleep well, Deseret, and may the desert keep you.